Hello guys and welcome to my channel. So today I would like to talk to you about event-driven data processing of course the Azure Cloud and using Azure Functions and Azure Blob Storage. And I've gone ahead to just create a simple image over here just to help you with a mental picture of what we'll be doing today. So imagine we have or you have like an app. That's what you have done here. Like I've called it React or Solid.js app, like a front-end web application, and you want to have the possibility to maybe process data files on the go without, of course, impacting the performance of your underlying architecture. And you would want to do this in a much more event-driven fashion, so that it doesn't, of course, you don't have to care so much about how this is done by having to allocate some memory and all that. So one way we can actually do it is to have something as pretty simple as what we have over here. And so we assume that on our React app, for example, we should have the possibility to, let's say, upload a file. Could be in any form, doesn't really matter. Could be CSV, TXT files, doesn't really matter. And then we, of course, this is connected to our web app container. And when we upload this file, which is, of course, should be possible from any front-end web application. From there, we can dispatch this file to a serverless function, and we don't have to let our backend do the work of processing this, parsing it, and writing it to the DB. We don't want to do none of that. So, but we want our front end to give us the possibility to upload it so that we can dispatch it out to a serverless function, and then the serverless function more or less puts it into a blob storage, like a container within a blob storage. In this case, I'm speaking specifically to the Azure cloud. So when we have this within the container within the blob storage, there are a couple of ways we can actually go ahead to process this data. So one of those would, for example, would be storage queues. So we could use storage queues with storage accounts on Azure, and more or less notify us when certain events happen. And those events could be when you put a new file into a container within a storage account, or when you delete. And the other option, of course, could be using event grids. And in this example, I'm going to show you this with an event grid topic. So we would have a topic subscribed to the event from our storage accounts. We would have a topic more or less mapped to the storage accounts, and then we would have a subscription subscribing to this topic. And then this subscription will, of course, have the trigger. The trigger would then be this other Azure function over here, which would then take the content of the file from our blob store, read it, parse it, write it into the database, and maybe delete the file afterwards, whichever way. And that way, we can again, now it's going to be like a complete loop. Our backend can then read this file from the database afterwards, and then again bring it to our front end, and we can actually display this on a nice chart. So this is what we're going to do today. And what I would do more or less would be to show you how we can set up our Terraform scripts, because we'll be doing this, of course, with Terraform. So we'll use our Terraform for our IAC to deploy our infrastructure to Azure Cloud. And then we can, of course, test things out and see how this actually works in the end. So without further ado, let's actually jump right in and start writing some code. So to help us structure our code, I'll create a couple of folders and create one called functions. So this is where actually most of our functions will actually live in. And I'll probably create one, I'll call it modules. So this would be where we define our Terraform modules. And so we maybe to start writing the code, we can actually go into modules and then create a couple of more required directories. So I can call this Python function. So this is going to be the template for us to create Python functions. And I create another one. I can call this resource group. No, I meant group. So I remove this resource group. And maybe I create a third one. I can call this topic subscription, like this. And that's mostly all I need. And then maybe if I go back to the root, I can create a couple of files that we will also require as well. And I can maybe, of course, create a main file. and I'll create a variable.tf file, and I'll need one for my environment variables. So I'll call this variables.dev, for example, or even test or whatever, tf vars. And now, of course, I need one for the provider. And what else do we need? I need one for locals. And I think that's it in the end. Then I will, of course, need two shell scripts. One is going to help me set up the projects, and of course one is going to help me just run all Terraform scripts. So I can call it setup.dev.shell like this, and I create another one. I can call this deploy.dev.shell, and I think that's actually all we need. So now we can go back into modules and go to resource groups, and in here I would like to create a couple of files. I will need a main.tf, I will need a variables.tf, and I'll need an outputs.tf. And so what we can actually do is copy all of this into what is this? Is to copy all these files, duplicate them more or less inside these other respective folders, because again, what we'll be doing will be pretty much similar in the end. So again, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible so we don't waste a lot of time on the boilerplate code, more or less. So for our resource group, we need a couple of variables. So we would need the name of the resource group, the environment where we want to deploy this, and of course the location. And that's also what I have in here. Again, I also need here to specify the type. These are also all strings, and these are all strings. So these are all the variables we would require for our resource group. And then in the main file, again, the code is going to be pretty straightforward. So we create a resource group from the resource manager. Then we provide a name, a location, and a couple of tags, and that's it. And for outputs, this you can of course think of this as the return arguments that you would probably get from, let's say, a function or whatever the case might be. And then for our own case, what we'll need to get out of this would be the name of the resource group we just created, and of course the resource group ID. And as you can see, it's actually pretty straightforward. This is all we require for now. And then we can move over to our subscription, our topic subscription. So for this is going to be a little bit longer list because we require a couple of things in here. But again, it's going to flow like before. So we require a prefix, and require the environment as well. We need a resource group, the system topic name that we want to attach the subscription to. The subscription ID, in this case, subscription of course requires like the top level, the hierarchy more or less, within which you now have resource groups, and then within the resource groups you have your resources. This is the idea we require here because we need these to attach to our topic in the end. So we need a function app name because again we would want to use a function as a trigger. If you remember, if you look at this picture, would remember that we want to use an Azure function here as a trigger to this event grid subscription. So that's also what we have over here. And of course, we also need the storage ID because we need to know to which ID we want to append our subscription to listen to more or less the events. So that's actually what we need in here. And then for our main file, we can actually just go ahead and create what we need. So this again is going to be pretty straightforward. So if you look here, again, we are creating an event grid subscription. We give it a name. We'll provide a system topic. So this is coming in from the variables, as you can see over here. As you can see over here, this is the system topic name. And then, of course, we need to add an Azure function, more or less, as the endpoint to which this topic would forward events when they come in here. And then so this it's always it needs to actually be of this format. So that was actually why we needed the subscription. So it goes to the subscription, of course, the top level hierarchy in this case. And then the resource group, go to the website, it goes to the Azure function app. So then specify, we need to specify the function within that Azure function, and then this here would be the name of the function. So what we can actually do is to parameterize this as well. So we can come in here, create a new variable, We can call this function name. It's going to be again of type string like this. And now what we can actually do is to come in here, instead of hard coding this, we can again provide this here. So this will be function name like this. The only thing is that whichever name it is we pass in here, we also need to remember to actually make this an actual, because this needs to be an actual function in the end that gets defined when we are done defining our Azure function that we want to map over here. So now that we've specified the function, this again, there are a couple of options we have in here but for now, the only thing that is important for us, of course, would be we can also actually use logic apps. I think it's called Azure logic apps. Anyway, so we can use Azure logic apps more or less to subscribe to this event, but for now we are specifying an Azure function. And of course, here we can see over here we adding included events. So this would of course tell us the kind of events to match. And if you are wondering which where these lists actually come about, I'm also adding a list in here. So this would of course take you to where all possible event types could be. Again, this depends on the kind of event you want to listen to. So because now we are focusing on Azure data storage events, so that is why this kind of events becomes important for us. There's a lot more, but for now we want to focus on when a new file is created and also when the file is deleted. So that's what we want to do here. That's all. And so for now, I can't think of any output we would want to have in here. So that's also totally fine. So for our Azure function, this would be again pretty straightforward. So for the variables, I'll provide a couple of variables. So we need some app settings. They're going to be like a map of strings, resource group name, the function name, the location, and then the source code path. So this would tell us where the source code actually is when we want to bundle this for the function during deployment. And now if we go to main, we need to create a couple of resources. So we're gonna create them in batches. So for our Azure function, so Azure function app files, we need to create a couple things. So we need to create a storage account. Within that storage account, we create a storage container, and then we create our insights. So that's also what we have here. So again, it's pretty straightforward. We need the name of the storage account, the resource group, the location, and here tier. So this will be the account tier for the storage account. And then the container as well, we give it a name, we provide the storage accounts to which it belongs, and then we provide the access type. Again, we're making it private because we don't want this to be publicly accessible. And then of course, app insights. So this is going to help us to more or less give us insights regarding logs and all that, and we can of course monitor the health of our deployments. That's really the point. And so now we need to create another storage account. This is going to be for our blob store. Again, pretty straightforward. We need to create a storage account, and within the storage account, we create a container. That's all we're doing. And other than that, now we need to create our system topic. So this is the topic here, this one here. This one over here, the event grid topic. That's what we need to create right now. And so to create this again, it's also pretty straightforward. We simply just from, of course, the resource manager, we use this systems topic, and then we again we provide a name, the resource group, everything is living within the same resource group. We provide a location, and of course the topic type. And then again, if you want to know what possible topic types there are within Azure Event Grid, again, simply just if you have the Azure CLI installed, all you need to do is run this command, and then you will see a handsome list of possible services, resources that you can actually subscribe to. But what we are interested for now is this Microsoft Storage account. And that's also why what's the kind of events we get to listen to over here, as you can see, are all tied to storage accounts. That's really the idea. And now, so regarding our Azure function itself, Regarding our Azure function itself, we need to create a service plan, and then we use the plan to, of course, provision our Azure function. So we're keeping it simple. It's going to be a Linux service plan. We are using SKU of Y1. So I think this is more than sufficient for what we're doing. There is no need to go premium for now. And now the we need, of course, a way to bundle our app during before deployment. So because of that, I can also come here and create a data section. So we are, again, this is going to help us to zip our package together. So that's why I also have here type is zip, and the source DM, more or less, we're using this source code path we are providing to this module, and then we again providing the name of the file in the end when this is zipped. And then we are excluding all these files because we don't want to bundle this within our deployment. So things like these batch files, for example, this cache, and if there are any certificate files, and then of course virtual environment, and any, maybe I can actually do this like this. So would match any .env file. We want to exclude this, of course, because we don't want to publicly expose our source code, more or less. Anyways, so that's what we need for this. And of course, for the Azure function, again, it's going to be pretty straightforward like the rest. Now we have everything we need actually, and then I can maybe close this tab now. So this will be our Azure function. Again, pretty straightforward. We have a name, resource group, and location. Storage account would be the one we created up here. So you can see the storage account. That's also what we have in here. We provide the access key because our function needs access to that storage account to be able to access the files, or of course write to it. And then service plan, this also this plan we created over here. And then we added app settings. So we need to provide a couple of settings. And of course, we are also providing these ones. So the point is that we'll provide this connection string for this blob stores storage account we created here. Mind you, this is where we will be dumping all the files we want to listen to their events to. So for any file uploads that happens, it will come inside of this container. And of course, our function needs somehow to have access to be able to read the files in that container. And that is why we are providing the primary access key here as a connection string to that storage container, more or less. So every other thing we have in here is pretty straightforward. Things like the function extension, the zip deploy, of course, this can come in from this, what we have over here. So we are using the zip deploy. And then within the site config, we are providing again additional configuration. So one for our application insights, and then the key as well, HTTP2 enabled or not, FTP state, and then application stack. This is where we of course specify we are working with Python. We can also have, if it were a custom handler, for example, we simply say custom handler true. But the thing is that we only need to provide one of these attributes, as you can see here. So we can get rid of this for now, that's not required. So app service log retention, in this, we are setting this to 30. And then the last thing we set here would be cores. So we are allowing our cores for now, and then turning setting support credentials to false. So pretty straightforward configuration we have here. And in the end, we might need a couple of things here, because if you notice, we actually bundled a lot of things within this module. We are creating a lot of things in here. Normally, if we wanted to be able to collaborate with other developers, each of the resources you see in here should be separate modules themselves. But of course, we are more, for the sake of this tutorial, we want to keep this as easy as possible. So that's why you see us mixing a lot of things in here, like storage accounts, storage container, event grid topic. Um, Again, like I said, normally all of this should be separate modules themselves. The way you would separate functions and then make each function do or perform one singular task. That's also the concept when it comes to writing config files with Terraform. But again, we are excused for now because we are keeping it simple. And when it comes to output, we want to get a couple of information. And actually, this is a duplicate, so I'm going to get rid of this. So we need the function name, the function ID, the system topic that we created, and again, the storage account ID. That's all we need from here, as straightforward as possible. And more or less, we are done with defining our modules. So the next thing we'd want to do now would be to actually use them to do our setup. And so for locals, I always like to provide a hard-coded list of regions, just so you don't make any errors at all. And then we simply then use it and more or less also use it to validate when a region is provided for us. So that's also what we have in here. So a location is provided, and then we use that value to try to match what it is in here. So for West Europe, for example, for me in Germany, I can provide just the string, but in the end, this is actually what I need to provide. So that's one of the things I like to provide in this locals file. And of course, apart from this, is also where I can specify some app settings environments related arguments. So if you want to separate them in terms of separate environments like dev or test, as the case may be, this is also one nice place to actually have that and then have it be referenced from every other place in our configuration setup. And for provider, again, is also going to be pretty straightforward. So we add a provider this way, and of course, I'm adding all of this because I don't want to store the Terraform state files locally. So this is going to be stored again in a separate blob store on Azure Cloud. So it's not going to be stored locally. And of course, we need to take care of this anyway. So because of that, we come to our variables file. And again, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So we need to provide a couple of these configurations in here. So like the subscription ID, client ID, secrets, as the case may be. But I don't think this is actually, I don't need this. I can actually get rid of this for now. That should be totally fine. And what do we, oh, okay, we actually need this here. So I will leave this in here. So what else? My IntelliSense is actually slow, but we can actually continue. There's no need to wait for this. And within this variables test, that's TFVAS, this is actually where we provide the environment variables we want to inject into our configuration when we run this. Actually, I can rename this to dev because I think everything we have in here is also pointing to dev. And so my IntelliSense is pretty slow, but that's also totally fine. So now this is where we provide all these values to say in here. If we don't, we will be prompted at the deploy time to provide them. Anyways, of course, I would provide my own secrets in here, but I will do that off camera actually. So, but to give you an idea of what it should look like, again, it's actually going to be pretty straightforward. It should look something like this, for example. I'm going to copy this and put it in here. So in here, you would need to, of course, if you already have an app registration set up with the required permissions, now you can actually provide the credentials in here, like the client ID, client secret, and the tenant ID. This is, as you can see, really required here. So this is useful when we are setting up our remote store for our state file, more or less. So that's why we have that in there. And just so if you have here, just go ahead and provide them here. That should be already fine. So now what I would like us to do is to set up our functions. So I can go into functions. I can go into, I can come out from our here and of course come out from modules and now I go into functions. It's completely empty for now. So I can make a directory and I can call this Python function. And so we should have one single function here. Maybe I can also make another one and I can call this custom handler. I already did a video in the past where I explained how you can actually work with Azure Functions in Go and of course in Rust as well. So I will add the link in the description so you can check them out if you want to know how that works. Anyway, so now we can actually go into our Python function to set things up. So if you already have the Azure Functions CLI installed, what you have to do here is pretty straightforward. So we do a func new, and now we actually just need to provide more or less, I think, sorry, we need to do a func init. And now we need to provide the language here. I'm just going to say Python, and it's going to set up the base things we require. So if you're looking here, we have all of this. We have our file here set up for us. But of course, there are no functions yet. So to create a simple function, we can do a func new. We give it a name. I can call this HTTP trigger. And I need to provide a template if I want. And I want this function to be a HTTP function, so it should have an HTTP endpoint exposed in the end. And I can provide auth level, and I can set this to anonymous. So this can be anonymous or admin or function. And now we create our function, and why does it ask me for the auth level again? Anyways, I make this anonymous. And as you can see over here, all this command did for us was more or less to add this section in our code. That's really it. Anyways, we can go ahead and I would like to create a virtual environment. So Python module and then venv. And I have venv already installed. So that's why I can actually invoke it this way as a module with Python. Anyways, this is going to go ahead and create a virtual environment for us, as you can see in here. And now I can source it. So source venv scripts activate. And you can see over here venv. So this also shows us that our virtual environment has been activated. And now I need to do a pip install upgrade pip. And this would update our package manager for us, and then we can then go ahead and install our dependencies. So if we always have this file in here, and inside here we have this singular Azure function package in here. So first I'm going to go ahead and do a pip3 install requirements.txt. I think I actually used just pip before. So anyways, I can actually run this again, and I do a pip3 install, and I do an upgrade, and I think this should be fine now. And then we don't get these errors again, because I should be able to switch to this, and this should be able to locate. 1 second. So we have this rectified, and what it means, we can actually now go ahead and start our Azure function locally, and we should be able to see a singular endpoint exposed for us, and that's also what you see down here. And I can simply copy this and curl it, and it should return a 200 status okay, as you can see here. And I can actually rename this to health, so this would be the endpoint. And maybe now what I can also actually do is probably to rename the function more or less. So instead of just, I don't like that it is actually called the HTTP trigger. And so now I can do function name, and I provide a name, and I can simply call this health. And now, so if I restart this, the name would be health, and then the endpoint should be health as well. So as you can see here, the name is health, and the endpoint is health as well. So that's just to show you that this is of course working. But of course, if you look over here, this is a HTTP trigger function. So that's why we are able to invoke this over HTTP. But what we are interested in more or less would be an event grid trigger function. And then I've also, maybe I collapse this, I can close this up, and I can collapse this. So what we are interested in would be something like this. And then to also have this, I'm probably just gonna install this first. So to do this, I need to import this package first. So I can go from Azure Storage Blob, and then I import Blob Service Client. And what else do I need? Of course, we need to do some pattern matching anyways. But of course, in here, I can already add this here, Azure storage blob, and then we need to install again. So we do a pip3 install to install this for us, and then we can come back in here and then do a little bit walkthrough over the code we have here. So again, I'm going to collapse this so you can see everything. So if you look over here, again, like before, we have a function name. Again, remember this name here needs to exactly match the name that needs to come in here, sorry, into our subscription. So this name here is actually referring to this one here. This one here, it has to match, otherwise we're going to have problems. Anyway, I also need to import os, and then I can actually get rid of these imports that we don't need. But anyways, so it has to be, of course, this is the name, and the type would be event grid trigger. Again, see here, this is a HTTP type of function, but here it's an event grid trigger. And then we have your ag name called event. So what this actually means is that when when an event comes into our topic subscription in here, when it comes into our topic, it's going to look at all the subscribers, it's going to find this one, and then it checks, of course, if those filters were added in the first place regarding listening to storage accounts. If it matches, then it forwards that event to this subscription, and then this, for this subscription to forward the event payload to our function, the name, it will give it a name, and that name is actually what is in here. So this name is going to hold that event payload as it coming in. So that's also why we have this method here to actually extract the content of that payload. And then to show you an example of what the payload could look like, I could create a file in here, and I can call this payload.json. And then what I'm just going to do is to copy samples of the payload, put it in here so we can actually see what it actually looks like. So I can actually paste this in here. And then, so just to show you what it looks like. So for each time we store a new file into the container within that blob store, this is the event that we actually get coming to this function. So if I open this side by side, maybe you'll begin to understand why we do what we do. So the important thing that you can see here is, of course, the API is called put blob. So that's also why we are using this to match this here. So again, this should be put blob, not blood. And of course, and the important thing again is this URL. So this URL is going to, of course, tell us this is the name of the storage account, this is the name of the container, and this is the name of the file. So this is also important. So that's also why we use a regex more or less to try to match these aspects of the URL, and then we extract the container name and the blob name. And again, if you remember this connection string, I need to get rid of this. It should be like this. Connection string, which was, of course, what we set when we defined our function. Again, if I take you back to this function definition within this configuration file, you will also see us create this here. So this is important. This is what's going to give us access to that file. This will give us the permissions we need to access that file. So that's also why we read it from here. So, but at this point, I will let you to handle error in case this was not set. I'll let you handle the error. Anyways, we would have a local path in here. I'm also probably just gonna keep this simple. I'm gonna call this data. So for now, I'm just putting this file in here and then do some simple manipulation with the file name. And then of course, then use this client to extract the file, download it. And for now, I'm not really doing anything, but at this point, we can maybe do some processing, and then maybe write to database. So this function is again what we have over here. So it's going to do the processing and maybe then write to database. And of course, you can also use a different function. For example, if maybe this becomes complex and maybe in the end you need to write to multiple databases, so you can actually use a logic app or use a series of functions and then distribute the tasks accordingly. So you don't have one function running for a really long time, but you can actually split the tasks to different functions and then speed things up a little bit. Anyways, that's actually the plan here, as you can see. So this should be able to process the data and then write it into a database for us. But these parts, of course, would be something I would leave for you to do. but our task more or less would be to set up the architecture, define the configuration files, and then add some dummy functions to actually see how things work. And then maybe as a bonus, I would like to add a time triggered function, so a function that would not be triggered by a HTTP request, but it's executes on its own, more or less, given like a defined um, frequency. So that's also what we have here. And so I'm giving it a name. So again, nothing fancy here, but what it means is that it's just going to run repeatedly, and then this would of course be the scheduled frequency regarding how often this function should run. Anyways, with everything set up, and of course, you have to come in here and provide this missing arguments. But if this is all set up, and what we would now do more or less would be to define what the kind of setup we also need to have for this deploy sh, and then this setup sh as well, because I don't want to constantly come in here and do Terraform plan, Terraform format, and all that. So that's also actually what I normally like to have in those shell scripts, more or less. So, and we can actually start with the setup. So the setup should be pretty straightforward. And again, I'm going to provide you a template. So 1 second. So within the setup shell script, so this is actually what it's going to look like. Again, I'm going to collapse this so we have more room. So basically, this helps me to actually create so this is what the shell script should look like. So what I can actually do now is add some arguments in here. This would be some, I can call it dummy sub. So, and then this would actually be what we have over here. So this would be our subscription. And so again, that's also what we have to put in here, subscription. And then again, we have tenant ID. I can also call this dummy tenant. We have client ID. Again, I call this dummy client. And then we have our client secrets, and again I call this dummy secrets. So again, please replace this with actual values, otherwise it doesn't really make sense. So for our client ID, again I provide this in here. For tenant ID rather, so client ID, again the same thing, and then the client secrets as well. And that's actually it. So again, we create a resource group because we want a separate resource group where this is going to live. And then inside of it, we create within our subscription, of course, we create a resource group, and then within the resource group, we create a storage account, and then within the storage account, we create a container, and then we now initialize with all these credentials because within this container is actually where we would want our state file to live, our Terraform state file. And anyways, when that is done, now what we simply need to do more or less would be I can actually just copy all of this and then go to our deploy script um, and paste it in here. But of course, for now, we don't need to do this anymore. So the only thing that we need to do will be to do some formatting. For example, we can do a Terraform FMT, and we do a recursive format, and then we do our init again, and of course we now do our plan and then apply. So I'll just paste the command here. So plan and apply. So, and the name of this var file of course should match this one. So the point is that if I have different environments, I could for example have different shell scripts, or more or less I can actually work with workspaces. But for this tutorial again, I'm keeping it simple so we can actually see how this works in the end. So anyways, with our setups done, again providing all these credentials like we talked about here already, the next thing for us will simply do to what I would need to do more or less will simply do a setup and then a deploy. So we simply do a Terraform, sorry, we do a shell setup. Of course I think I need to go out of this first and this one as well. And then here we can simply do a setup. And then when we are done doing a setup, we now do a deploy, and that's it. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this script with the proof, of course, replacing this with my actual credentials, and then show you what this looks like in the end. So I've actually gone ahead to run the deployment, and as you can see, I also actually gave it the same name here. So that's also why you see the name of the function here as event grid trigger. And now, so I'm actually within the function, as you can see over here, and then I'm subscribed to the logs to actually see what's actually happening. So to test things out, to actually see if everything is behaving the way we'd expect it, I would directly try to upload the file inside this container within this blob store. Then I'll select a file from my local PC, maybe this main.tf file, for example. And now I'd upload this. So we see the file in here. And what you also see is our function actually gets triggered. And if you look at the function, again, this is actually what we said, processing event grid event. So, and if you look into the payload, what I have underlined here, so it's a put blob, is the APIs of put blob, and of course you see the URL, it shows us exactly where this container is. And of course we are getting this because we subscribe to just two event types. If you remember, we subscribe to put when an object is added, and of course when it's deleted. So what it means is that if we actually delete this file, for example, we should also get another event. Our function will be triggered as well. And then if you look at the API, for example, this now is delete blob. The first one was a put blob. Anyways, that was actually what I wanted to show you in this tutorial. I'm gonna go ahead and destroy the resources that I've created for this tutorial. But I hope that this was useful to someone, and I will also try to provide the source code for whomever that might need it in the end. But other than that, if you have any questions or clarifications, if you have like some modifications you would want to make, let's say if you would want me to modify this in some way to certain problems you're trying to solve in your place of work, for example, of course, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be glad to assist as much as I can. Anyways, that will be all for now, guys. And of course, if you're new to the channel, just go ahead and smash the subscribe button. Stay in the loop so you can actually always keep you updated when we have a new content for you. Anyways, guys, that will be all for now. And until next time, have a lovely evening and bye bye.